Hi, I'm Kevin Orr, the head coach of the USA Paralympic Rugby team, representing the United States in Athens, Greece in 2004. And I'm honored to be part of Blaze Sports of America and your organization to bring wheelchair rugby into your community. We're going to go over some simple, basic rules of the game of wheelchair rugby. The game is played 4-on-4 on a basketball court for individuals that have impairment in their upper and lower extremities, otherwise known as quads or quadriplegics. Players that are eligible to play wheelchair rugby include players with polio, cerebral palsy, spinal cord injuries, traumatic brain injury, and other disabilities that affect the upper extremities and lower extremities. The game is played on a regulation basketball court in 4 8-minute quarters. When starting coaching, you have to develop your own philosophy based on the athletes and the people that you're serving. Not everyone wants to be a high-level competitive athlete, nor does everyone want to be a recreational athlete. The idea is really to create a fun and a safe environment for your athletes to participate in. By having a fun and safe environment, you can reach the goals of all the athletes and they can all function on the same team. It's very important to make sure that we create the environment from all aspects of the game to be safe. Again, you want to make sure that you have a fun and a safe environment so the athletes can continue to grow in the sport. And it's neat to see the kids that are starting out, boys and girls, and typically getting more girls than boys in some cases in some programs playing the game. Wheelchair rugby requires specialized equipment. It takes away from the standard wheelchair that you would use for an everyday chair, with chairs that are specially designed for a player to play the game. We have a defensive chair that is used for a player who primarily is picking or blocking, and we have an offensive chair that is designed to not be blocked or to be able to break through a play. The offensive chair is specifically set up with wings that protect a player from getting held by an opponent, and then the wheels and the spoke guards are designed to stop a player from getting held with the opposing team's defensive chair. The spoke guards are made out of a solid either aluminum or plastic that will really prevent a player from getting held and protect the player. The chairs are designed for safety as well, with the camber that's in the wheels all the way to every component that you have on the chair is specifically designed for play and for safety. The defensive chair is set to be wide open, which allows a player to hold an opponent or to be able to grip using the ability of the chair. It allows the front wing to be able to fit underneath the tire to be able to hold an opponent. You'll see many different variations of an offensive and defensive chair, but the principles are typically for blocking or to not be blocked. Other pieces of equipment that you need for wheelchair rugby are to really make the wheelchair part of the player. We have several different types of straps that you need to have. Buying just a standard weight belt is typically a way that a player will position themselves into the chair to keep their balance. We have ski binders or snowboard binders that help hold the player in place into the chair at several different places. At the hips, we have a strap that goes around the waist, and players will typically strap their knees as well as their feet into the chair, which is important because you don't want to have extra movement in the chair, because if you're paralyzed from the waist down, you want to be able to make sure that you have every piece of your body positioned to make sure that the chair moves with the player and for the player's safety, so we don't damage during full contact of the sport. So strapping is a very important part of the game. We have 2 different gloves too to protect the hands as well as to enable a player to catch the ball easier. We have a rubber-coated glove that allows just a little bit of tack, so if you don't have grip in your hands, the extra rubber on the gloves helps catch the ball. Or we have just standard leather receiver gloves, which help protect the hands a little bit better. They're more expensive, but it really comes down to a player's preference. One of the important aspects of wheelchair rugby is strapping into the wheelchair. I'm going to have Brent Poppin explain strapping for us. Brent?
The chairs are built for performance, and to utilize the performance of the chair, you want to have the strapping involved in it. And we'll start with the toe straps. you have around your feet, and that's to keep your feet from falling out during play because the sport has a lot of contact in it, so it keeps your feet from moving. And if we get rid of these, we have a ski belt or a snowboard binding used to ratchet your waist in, because once you get set in your chair and you're comfortable, you want to be in your chair as tight as you could possibly be, so when you move, the chair moves with you. And so you'll get in to your chair and you could ratchet these down and get you in a lot tighter than you could with just a Velcro belt. So everyone's going to that. And then we have these Velcro belts to keep your legs, when you're in the chair, to keep your legs, your thighs away from the chair, away from the wheel, so there's no rubbing involved. And then for players that are paralyzed that don't have the trunk muscle, we have the weight belt that goes around the back of the chair and actually straps you into the back of the chair to take the place of balance. So it will balance you in your chair, so when you get hit, you don't flop over forward or you don't flop over sideways. And again, you use that and ratchet get it as tight as you possibly can.
There are several different types of wheels and tires that a player, just depending on the level of hand function that they have, use, and depending on what their role is. We have an aluminum spoke guard for a player that has fairly decent hand function, or they play an offensive role. We'll have an aluminum or a plastic spoke protector, which will allow a player not to be gripped as easily so that they can roll through a block. And then we have a rubber-coated push rim, which really allows the player to hold an opponent and really help hold them for an extended period of time. The red rubber on this type of rim will actually hold a player with this type of rim rather easily. So it really is based on what the role of the player is on the court. There's different types of rubber. We use a red rubber, or we use a black rubber surface. These are gripping rubbers. Or else we use an aluminum spoke guard with an aluminum specifically welded directly in, so there's a flat surface not to be grabbed, or plastic or other type of surface that is used. But if you'll notice, there's not much of a seam between the push rim and the spoke protector, which allows the player not to be held. This is a game for athletes with quadriplegia, therefore they have some impairment in their upper extremity. In order to allow a player to grab or grip the push rim or the ball better, we use a substance of clister or pine tar or other sticky substance to allow the player to get some grip. Also, when a player straps into their glove and tapes on their glove, we have them tape with the sticky side of the glove out, which allows the player to have a little extra grip. So either a stickum with the aid of the sticky side of the tape really allows the player to grip the wheel as well as the ball better. Next, we're going to show you an athlete that is strapped into the wheelchair and how the player looks when they are in the chair. As we showed you before, we had the binders and the leg straps and the foot straps to be able to position the athlete as tight into the chair, so the chair essentially, when he moves, the chair moves with him. So if I were to push him in any direction, he were to move and his body's going to remain stationary. We have the hip binders, the leg straps down here, as well as toe straps. So when he moves, the chair will go with him. As you see these pieces of equipment, this enables the player to maintain their balance for trunk support as well as hip support. Early on, when a player starts strapping their body, it takes a while for their body to adjust to the strapping. It can cause them to be uncomfortable, even in an area where they may not be able to feel. So it takes a while to adapt to sitting and positioning their body in this position, especially if they're straight out of rehab or newly injured or haven't been involved with a lot of activity. Not only the stress of the exercise, but the stress of repositioning the body in a different way is something that takes time to adjust. For the wheelchairs, for safety, there's a common point of contact, which is 11 centimeters off the ground for safety in any point of contact, whether it be in the wing area or in the bumper area, the point of contact is 11 centimeters. You don't want to have any contact area that is lower, because this is a full contact sport, and that could basically ramp a player into the air. So the point of contact is standard between 10.5 and 11.5 centimeters, which the standard point being 11 centimeters, as the common point of contact in any contact area on the wheelchair. Taping is an important part of the game. Once you have your gloves on, making sure that you have a proper tape job so you don't pinch your hand and leave marks or blisters on your hand with your taping, and to make sure that your hands are well protected. Norm is going to show us how he tapes his hand and reverse the sticky side of the tape out in order to allow him to grip the ball and the push rims better.
What I use is it's a high quality duct tape. It's like 11 mil thick. You can get it at any Home Depot. I like to start it with my teeth sometimes because the gloves sticks to the gloves too much though. You start it on the bottom, and then what I do is just kind of turn the roll of duct tape, reverse it so the sticky side is out, and then after that, it just rolls right around. And then you can use your teeth, rip it right off. And that way you have sticky side out so you're able to grip.
There are several different types of taping, and Sam is going to show us a different type of taping that he uses and the type of tape that he uses for rugby.
Well, because a lot of what we're pushing is with more of a friction stroke, we have lack of grip, most of us. So we tend to get, a lot of guys tend to get blisters underneath their hands. So to protect their hands before I put the gloves on like Norm was using, I use a foam pre-wrap tape underneath and then cover it up with a white athletic tape. So I just kind of get a start going, get a base layer, put on there. This does a lot of things. Even though I don't technically sweat, my hands do start to sweat underneath there. This absorbs some of that moisture, gives a little bit of padding, and gives a protective layer for chafing. That usually takes care of it. And that's pretty much it. Then I put my gloves over it, and I'm ready to tape those up, much like Norm taped his on.
Sam is here to demonstrate transferring into a wheelchair, and he'll also explain how others may, when he first started transferring, how you may take some simple things and turn them in to make your job easier when you get in your wheelchair.
Well, I've been doing this for a little while, so for me now it's not as big of a deal to transfer just here in the open. But a lot of guys that are starting out, or a lot of guys that are lower point of injury, will back their chair up against a wall so it doesn't move anywhere. They'll lock their brakes down so that their everyday chair doesn't go anywhere, and then everything's a little bit more stable. But generally, you're bringing this chair against your chair that's stable, so it's sort of picked. You get your legs into position so that you're ready just to make your transfer of your body right over into the frame. And like I said, it's a lot easier when you're first starting out to do all of that with your chair really braced up against a wall, your brakes locked down. After you get used to it for a while, it's much like any other transfer you make every day, getting into your car or getting into something else, into bed, whatever. So,
Getting ready for practice typically takes a little bit longer for wheelchair rugby than it would for other sports. We're going to demonstrate how the guys get into the chairs, and the responsibility of the coach is really to be there to assist the athletes, as well as getting some other volunteers to come and help the athletes get in and out of their chair. Depending on the ability level of the athletes, having assistance to help the person transfer and get into their wheelchair is an important part of a beginner level team. The athletes that we'll have here will be able to independently transfer, but typically starting out that's not the case. We have athletes that'll require 1 to 2 people assisting them getting in and out of their wheelchairs and assisting them with their straps. we'll have each of the players go ahead and transfer into their wheelchairs, and they can demonstrate each individual nuance that they have as far as getting in and out of their wheelchair.
So they don't get stuck?
As he's getting in his chair, typically what's going to happen is you may have to, if you use a wheelchair, you may have to pull in behind to be that wall so the chair doesn't move, and he's going to pull the wheelchair tight to his chair and put his brakes on. As he's making the transfer, sometimes you may have to grab the athlete to help them get in their chair, or help them if they were to lose balance and make sure that they are safe when they're transferring. As well as when someone is new in their transfer, you want to make sure that they're not dragging their skin on the wheel or bumping it hard, because skin issues are definitely a real possibility when transferring into a rugby wheelchair. As the person's getting in their wheelchair too, the other thing that you need to be aware of is make sure that you move any extra straps that might go underneath the athlete, so they're not sitting on the, from a comfort standpoint as well as from a safety standpoint, and then assisting the athlete with the straps and getting the straps all in position to get the athlete in a position to where they can get in their chair quickly, so you're not taking an hour and a half to get in the wheelchairs to start a practice. Beginner level athletes typically will take a considerable amount of time longer than athletes that have been doing it for quite a long time. As you'll notice with this athlete, he's got a binder that goes underneath the binder to protect his skin, so before he transfers into the chair, he has an extra layer of protection, because any area where you don't have sensation, you want to make sure that you're protecting the skin, similar to protecting the skin underneath the gloves. And then after he gets the jersey on, making the transfer over. And again, just making sure that every piece of equipment that you have is in place and easy to reach. And that's one of the things too, that you don't want to be running all over the gym to pick up gloves, to get the extra strap, to get all the necessary things that you need to have to get in the chair. So as soon as he gets in the chair, having everything close by so strapping doesn't take an extra long time before we start practice. And then occasionally too, the other thing that with an athlete, if they have a lot of spasticity, you may want to get the spasticity and let it shake out before you get into the wheelchair, because especially if someone's newly injured, they may have more problems regulating their spasticity. So letting their legs shake out and get that in place before the transfer is actually made, so there's not issues with spasticity in the transfer. And depending on the level of hand function, you may also need to assist the athletes with some of the fine motor skills, helping pull the straps a little bit tighter on their feet, helping loosen Velcro, even helping once they're transferred in to make sure that their shorts or pants aren't all drawn up into their chair to help protect the skin. Typically, athletes that are high-level quadriplegics may have a little bit more difficulty transferring. Some of these athletes may use a sliding board early on with their transfer to really help them get in and out of the chair because of the loss of the muscle function that they have. But Scott will demonstrate how he's able to independently transfer. He's got the chair backed up to the wall, and then you'll see his head come forward and down to be able to bring his bottom up so it can swing over into the chair. And as you notice that he's waiting for a little bit of spasticity to release before he makes the transfer over, so it doesn't kick him out of position as he transfers over. It's important to have the wheelchair as stable as possible so when he is making the transfer, he doesn't fall and hit the ground. Typically, this is a great opportunity for you to assist, or at least stand by very closely in case he loses his balance and may fall. Now that we're in our chairs, it's time to get started. To go work on our fundamentals, whether you're a recreational team or an elite team, fundamentals are the key to our success. So let's go out on the court and get started. Wheelchair skills are probably the most important part of the game of wheelchair rugby. The guys will demonstrate different types of mobility that will show us how we get around in the chairs, going forward and backwards. The aspects of going forward and then your side-to-side turning are as important, as well as having a well-rounded attitude with balancing your shoulders, going backwards and forward. The next skill we'll demonstrate is a skill called up and backs. The ability to be able to change directions forward and backward is an important part. Being able to stop and change directions going forward and backward is an important part of playing half-court offense and defense in the game of wheelchair rugby. As the athletes demonstrate this skill, it takes a lot of wheelchair control to be able to stop your chair and then quickly change direction. The last important part is being able to change your side-to-side direction. We'll demonstrate with Christmas trees. Forward, forward, back, back, and being able to make simple changes of directions forward and back is an important part of the game of wheelchair rugby. Just being able to maneuver the chairs. The wheelchairs are set with the center of gravity forward to be able to allow the wheelchairs to turn a little bit quicker, as well as having more camber in the wheelchairs to be able to allow the side-to-side mobility of the wheelchair. Because wheelchairs don't have lateral, a person in a wheelchair doesn't have lateral movement, the ability to change direction quickly is very important. Ball handling is an important part of wheelchair rugby. We use a regulation volleyball that has a little bit softer skin on the volleyball to make it easier to catch. When first starting out with wheelchair rugby, it's important to start with basic skills, whether it's bouncing a two-handed ball in front of you or really where the athlete can reach, and then progressing your skill level to dribbling the ball with one hand. And then once they're getting it with their dominant hand, switching over to their non-dominant side, and then working the ball around the chair and varying the height and speed in which they dribble the ball. Once they do it stationary, then dribbling the ball, moving around is the next progression in just your general ball handling skills with the chair. And again, moving the ball side to side and being aware of where the wheelchair is. A common mistake that a new player will make is they'll dribble the ball typically off the side of their wheelchair, and then you spend a lot of your practice picking the ball up. And as a coach, you want to just work and gradually work the player up to their ability level and then challenge them with different drills that allow the player to progress with their ball handling skills. The next ball handling skill we have is picking the ball up off the floor, which Andy will demonstrate how to do a ball pickup and when he's wheeling his wheelchair, picking the ball off the floor. Andy will roll the ball forward, and then as he gets towards the ball, he puts his hand on the ball and allows the wheel to pick the ball up and put it in his lap. And we practice ball pickups to either side of the chair, and it allows the player, as they're playing the game, to be able to handle the ball. Since most of the players don't have grip, this allows the player to be able to pick the ball up quickly and move the ball and keep the ball in play while they're playing the game. Passing and catching are very important to the game of rugby. These athletes will demonstrate a variety of different passes. Typically starting with simple passes, with bounce passes, are the ways that you should start with your athletes in a stationary position, and then gradually working up to in-the-air passes, one-handed passes, very high arcing passes, and a wide variety of different passes in their repertoire. As your athletes develop these skills, you can incorporate different drills in with a variety of athletes to work on your passing and catching. We'll have our athletes demonstrate a passing drill that we use with the USA program to demonstrate passing and some teamwork skills. Go ahead. Getting the players to work where they're passing the ball while they're moving, as well as turning and allowing the players to have a distraction by having a defender come within the passing lane are important aspects that you need to work your athletes into. if you can get your athletes working on passes, this will allow them to play the game a lot easier and give them different situations outside of the game that you can work on their fundamental skills with their passing. A similar component to blocking in football, wheelchair rugby, a strategic part of wheelchair rugby, is using your blocker to not do one-on-one moves. So we'll have a 2-on-2 demonstration with a blocker and a ball handler with 2 defenders and show the importance of a pick to the ball to protect. If Cliff were to come out here and come 1-on-2, it makes for the defenders to make his job a lot harder. Whereas if he uses his blocker, Norm's going to just show a block to the outside and allow Cliff to roll down the court and set up his blockers to continue to work down the floor to allow the team to score easier down the floor. It's important to work a 2-on-1 pick to allow the players to get down the floor without having to pass the ball as little as possible. These guys will show a pick and roll, breaking the half court at full speed. As the ball advances down the floor, the ball is going to advance to be able to help set the picks up. He'll pull the ball over to one side to draw the defender and then roll off the back of the defender and the pick to roll up and advance the ball up the court. Blocking and picking is a strategic part of the game of rugby. The low point player with the defensive front end allows the player to hold and block longer than it would take for a person with a similar chair. So as the ball advances up the floor, he will draw the defenders over to one side to allow the block to set up. As the block is set up, the ball will then reverse back around to the other side and advance the ball up the floor. This allows the offensive player time to move the ball up the floor and allows the person with the chair that's set up to block to do his job. Similar to a fullback in football who will block for a lead blocker and block for his tailback. Now let's see this at full speed. Cliff will set up the pick. Norm will set the pick. After he sets the pick, the ball advances up the floor, and now Cliff and Norm have a 2-on-1 advancing down the floor. Now let's watch a screen in half court. For this drill, we'll demonstrate some screens in the half court. We have the white team. They're here on defense, and the red team will set up some screens over here on this corner. As the ball advances up to set up the screen, it's important that the ball handler really helps set up the screens. So as they go together, they're really working to enable their blockers to set up. As he draws the ball towards the middle, it allows the screen to set up over in the corner and pick the corner to allow for an easy goal. And they'll demonstrate again where we roll through, and again, it's important for the ball to really help set up the pick. It all comes down to timing, spacing, and communicating between the offensive player with the ball as well as his pickers that he has set up away from the ball. Now let's have some fun and watch this at full speed. And again, this is a very full contact sport. So as you watch them roll through it again at full speed, you can see the contact and the importance of being able to set up the picks to allow the player to get set up in the pick. Sometimes takes the ball getting stopped to reverse around the pick. Another aspect of blocking and screening is a pick and roll. Now we'll demonstrate a pick and roll. The red team is on offense, and they will demonstrate the pick and roll. As he gets the ball, the block comes in. As the block goes down the court, he comes inbound and rolls down court uncontested with a simple block with the ball. Now we'll watch this in full speed action. The ball sets up out of bounds, and the player will roll through at full speed and get the ball. The person with the ball actually acts to draw both the defenders away. Once he draws the defenders away, the inbounder screens and rolls down the court wide open, uncontested for an easy goal. One strategy in the game of wheelchair rugby is a concept called backpicking. When the opposing team drops into the half-court defense, if we can take one of their players out of the play, we can have a numerical advantage by backpicking. So we'll demonstrate by having an offensive team score, and when they drop back into defense, the red team will try to hold out the player that scored to keep them from going down to play defense on the other end of the court. As Brian advances down to score towards the goal, he advances down towards the goal, and they allow him to score, which typically they wouldn't. Then the red team is going to transition and try to find him as he comes into the court to keep him out of position, so when his team goes down court to set up, the red team will have a 4-on-3 advantage to advance down the floor. So they hold him out of the play, and then once the ball advances to half court, all 4 players break down to have a 4-on-3 advantage against the other team. There are 3 keys to a successful offense: timing, spacing, and communication. Whether you're playing in the half court or you're playing full court, those 3 keys will be demonstrated in our half court set. As we demonstrate, we have the court spread out by having 2 players set up on the end to draw the defenders over and spread out the key. And then as the players advance, the ball will move forward. The pick needs to move up the court in advance and with the ball. As the ball draws the defender over, that creates more space in the key. The ball will then reverse around, and the pick will maintain his position to pull in towards the key. At the same time, the ball will advance towards the key, and then the defender will roll into the key as well as the pick to catch the ball and score easily. Now we'll watch this in full motion, in full speed. As the ball advances down, he has to make the defender consider him a threat. After he sets up, the pick's allowed to roll in, draws him as a threat, and allows the goal to score easily. When you're playing against a press, it's important to have several different plays for press break. We'll demonstrate our press break that we use to keep, again, the 3 principles of timing, spacing, and communication. We have a person that's set up to pick, and the inbounder will inbound to a primary ball handler. Once the pass comes in, the passer will go away from the play and help set up a screen away from the play. At the same time, he comes in, he comes off the screen, and allows and creates a passing lane, and keeping the court spread out in order to allow for quick passing lanes. As the defense reacts to where the ball is positioned, the ball moves up the floor, and the offensive players move towards the goal and pass the ball and advance the ball down the court with 3 or 4 simple passes. Now we'll watch this in full speed. As the ball comes in, we have a picker and we have the inbounder. Once the inbounder's in, the picker's going to hold his pick until the ball advances to half court. The ball handler will move the ball with simple short passes, and the offensive players will move and create angles to create passing lanes to score quickly. Wheelchair rugby is similar to football and basketball in the respect that this is a full contact game. So in football, your different schemes that you're going to have for defense are very similar to the way that you're going to configure your game for defense. You can either go man-to-man, which each man takes a person that's similar in ability level, and if you have talented athletes, taking man-on-man is one aspect. Or you can do different zones, similar to a 43 in football, or different 2-1-2 presses in basketball. The different presses that we line up with 4 players are a 1-1-2, a 2-1-1, 2-2, or similar zone presses, a 1-2-1. We're going to go over a man-to-man, which man-to-man really means what it says. Each player defends one man. So we're going to demonstrate a man-to-man press. As the ball comes in, each player is assigned to a specific player. As the ball moves up the floor, that player is responsible to stop the player that they are defending, as we'll watch them move down the floor. As the players move down the floor, they are responsible to stay in position with the player that they started the play all the way down the floor until the goal is scored. Now we'll watch this at full speed. As the ball comes in, it's responsible for the player that's playing defense to really stay in position to guard the players that they were assigned to guard on the floor. Typically, you play a man-to-man defense when the players that you have on your team have superior skill over the players that they are defending. As we talk about zones, zones are similar to football or basketball zones. In basketball, you have zones based on where the players are located on the court, similar to a 2-1-2 press. We have presses that essentially we shorten the name and call them a Y, which is a 1-1-2. We'll demonstrate a Y defense, and it's the responsibility within the zones for the players to play within their zone, and it forces the players on offense to go to a different part of the court based on where you configure your zone. The red team will demonstrate a Y. We have two players that are set in the middle of the court, and we have two players that play on the deep side of the court, which forces the ball to come over to one side of the floor. As the ball comes onto the court, it's the goal of the two players that are down low to keep the ball positioned to one side of the floor. The other players on the back side of the two are playing safety, where they don't allow any players to get behind them. And as the ball shifts down the floor, it essentially turns back into a man-to-man press. And now we'll show this at full speed. It's important for your zones, the people that are playing the zones, to really stay in their zones for when they move the ball up the floor. Then their defensive teammates know where they're going to be positioned on the floor. If a player moves out of their zone, the defense can break down, and it causes problems for the remainder of the defensive team. There are several common fouls in the sport of wheelchair rugby. It is a full contact game. However, contact can only be made from the axle forward. There is a specific rule called spinning, that if there's contact made behind the axle that causes the player to violently spin, it is called spinning, and the player that is charged with spinning spends 1 minute in the penalty box. And as you can see, spinning can be a very dangerous foul because it can cause a player to fall out of their wheelchair or even snap their neck around rather quickly, which can be very dangerous in the sport of wheelchair rugby. Oh yeah, that's a spin. Wheelchair rugby is a contact game, but contact is chair to chair, not person to person. So therefore, if the offensive player has the ball and the defender reaches in and makes contact with the other player's arm, that is considered a reach. Player classification is set to determine the level of function that a player has. Typically, the low point players are your higher level of injury or you're more severely impaired, and your higher point players typically have more function and typically have better balance. Low point players are typically your players that are your blockers or defenders, and your high point players are typically your players that are ball handlers and your stronger blockers. Your low point players, 0.5s, 1s, and 1.5s, typically have limited function of their fingers, which Norm will demonstrate he doesn't have any finger dexterity at all. Typically will have very minimal triceps or no triceps at all, and will typically sit in a lower chair and in a defensive chair with sticky red rubber push rims. Players of the same classification, which these three players are all the same classification as Class 2s, may look entirely different, but classification is based on ability to use the hands, arms, and their trunk function. Bob Lujano is a amputee who has trunk function but is missing his limbs from just below his elbows down, can move in his chair, can raise his arms above his head, can handle the ball very similar to a Class 2. Andy is a player who does not have any trunk balance, has very minimal hand function, can wiggle the fingers, has triceps, and has the ability to extend his arms up and down. Whereas Cliff has no use of his hands, very minimal with his triceps, but has full use of his trunks. And a combination of all these players is typically your higher functioning players, which typically have hand function and may have some trunk function and be able to support their balance when they're being knocked in the wheelchair rugby game. It has been our pleasure to get you started on your path to wheelchair rugby, and we look forward to your growth. And we'll see you on the court, and good luck. 1, 2, 3.
USA Rugby!